Words are the paints, and writing is the paintbrush of the mind. The words we use reveal our minds, and they can paint incredible pictures and empower us to create phenomenal futures. However, words must both be digested and shared. Everyone, including you, has words that can contribute to society and make an impact. In my small corner of the internet, I've written about 119 Spark blog posts and posts in roughly about 40,000 words, because I write very short pieces and I'm working to write daily. And I've recorded some of these words into podcasts like the one you're listening today. I'm publishing 87 new episodes this year. But the real power to share comes from the digestion of new words that can fuel your growth, challenge your thinking, provide new insights, or allow you to take a stance. Having listened to over at least 30,000 minutes of audiobooks and programs on both Audible and Scribd, not including podcasts, and have read about 44 books this year, here is my 2021 book recap. And what I want to do for the book recap is pretty much just give you a highlight of some of the books that are on repeat, some of the books that made a difference in my life, what I'm reading, what's up next in my plate, as well as a reflection on how to study and how to really be intentional with the words that you are digesting in your mental diet. So to start, I'm currently reading and finishing The Tao of Charlie Munger by David Clark, just to learn a little bit more about how Charlie Munger thinks. I'm also learning and reading about Gandhi's autobiography, which is phenomenal thus far. It's great to learn about those who have gone before us. So I'm currently reading and finishing those two books. I usually read couple books at a time. I guess on Audible you can do that with different apps, but that's what I typically do. So the books that made a significant impact on my life this year, and when I say significant, I mean that these actually changed my actions and they had an impact to me. So the two books that made this list this year in 2021 is See You at the Top by Zig Ziglar and The Eighth Habit by Stephen Covey. Ziglar has helped me significantly this year. I think I read around March. And then The Eighth Habit was actually a recent read here in December. And it's actually encouraging me to change a few ways that I share here on the podcast and going very direct and giving you as much information and value as much as possible and truly finding my voice to help you and you grow in all areas of your life. Like we mentioned, soul, mind, body, relationships, and contribution. The books that I've repeated or gone through multiple times this year. So there's about 4 different books, but these are on repeats. Some of these I've listened not only just twice. I know that I've listened up to 16 times of Zig's work, but I read The Practice by Seth Godin several times and gone through it, and actually in one of his creative workshops, which I highly recommend. It is a lot, but I recommend it. I read almost everything I can get my hands on for Zig and am continuing to repeat Ziglar almost on a monthly basis. And I read every single book from Jim Collins. Jim Collins is by far my favorite business author behind Drucker. And Jim Collins' writing is just, it's amazing. It's very on point. It really gives me a lot of solution-oriented ideas in entrepreneurship. And finally, on repeats, I forgot how many times probably the 5th time, listening to The Philosophy of Thomas Aquinas by Peter Kreeft. This book is, it's a lot to chew through, but it's very good for repetition and something that I very much enjoy to listen to, especially when I was cycling outdoors and enjoying the sun and learning about theology and philosophy. So the books that I'm reading up next, I have about 4 different areas that I'm up next in my plate to read. Been recommended by podcasts that I listen to check out The Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. Reading more of Charlie Munger, probably more about Warren Buffett as well for investing. Definitely reading and rereading some of the No BS books by Dan Kennedy, just to hone in on marketing principles for direct response. And of course, definitely have more Ziglar on repeat. And the thing about the words that you digest, about what we read and what you listen to, it's not about the volume of how much. I started with statistics in the beginning just to give a good premise of like that I really enjoy and dive deep in literature and books and studying. What you're reading, what you're studying, it's not about how much. It's about the quality of what you input in your mind and the repetition to chew through things. That's why this year I really focused on going through the books multiple times. And actually, I didn't list it up here, but I have gone through Hermosi's new book, $100 million Offers, probably twice, but it didn't make the list as a big one, but I can add that to the list as well. But it's about quality and repeating what you've learned so that you actually grasp it and it becomes part of you or becomes part of your habits. And I encourage you to study what you want to learn more of and what can add value to your life and others. So it's not just about what's curious top of your mind, but also how can learning something help you help others. And I think that's a really key and intentional way of your digestion of what your mental diet is. Another way to strategically be intentional about what's in your diet, I learned this from Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, where the whole rule of the 10 years of practice, by reading that book, I had a reflection in identifying which areas of my life do I have almost or more 10 years of practice, 10 years of studying, 10 years of learning, intentional practice. If you read, I think it's Cal Newport's So Good They Can't Ignore You, he talks about intentional or deliberate practice. And I encourage you to look at your life and identify what are the areas where you have at least 10 years or close to 10 years of experience or practice or know-how or knowledge, because this is for you something that you can really double down in educating yourself on and working your way to be exceptional, world class in these areas. And it just takes a little bit of intention and a little bit of work, and over time, you can become more proficient in those areas. For me, I think it's 5 areas or 6 areas is theology, personal growth, direct response, sales, marketing, leadership, business strategy, and finance investing. So I clump, simple finance, investing, leadership, business management together, because those are my key areas. But I don't limit myself to these topics. So when you look at the areas that you're proficient in, you don't have to limit yourself to just these. But when you focus on deliberately studying these areas, it's like investing in an account that's been compounding for years, for decades. And when you invest in an account that's been compounding, it's going to obviously grow significantly. And if you're starting to invest in a new seed, into a new, let's say a planting analogy, a new little pot, new little plant, you start to plant the seeds there and start to water it over time. Yeah, of course, it's going to take longer. So I encourage that, but I also want you to have leverage of what you've already been doing or studying or learning in your own life, and to potentially double down on that if that's of interest of you. So what are your topics? I encourage you to maybe pause and reflect and look back at your previous 10, 15, 20 years and see what are you proficient in and what can you become an expert in that field. Playing the long-term game, looking at the next 20 years. If you were to practice and go down this path, how can you become exceptional in the next 20 years? And maybe you don't want be exceptional for the sake of honors or of designations, but it's really a good practice to be able to look at the long-term game and also being able to intentionally select the diet for your mind. I know that in This Is Marketing by Seth Godin, Seth mentions that whatever field you work in, you should be well read in that field, from the authors who shared their ideas in the past or opinions for a particular study. And I encourage this as well, simply because if you're in a particular industry or your contribution in your work, let's say, for example, you're in insurance or you're in healthcare or you're in a writer or you're an artist, whatever that is, it's good to learn from those who've been there before you and identify what are the mental thoughts or the mental models or frameworks of others before this, to do two or 3 things, really. 1, you can build on top of their foundation. 2, you can learn from them and actually apply that to your own life. Or 3, you can challenge old ideas with braver new ideas. I also encourage a healthy amount of personal development books and, of course, health-related books to have a more wholesome approach to your mental diet. So what's your goal with words next year, looking at 2022? Don't just strive to read more. Remember, focus on quality and repetition, and don't just digest, don't just consume, but share. Practice on sharing. I believe there is a book inside all of us. Yours may just be waiting to be written, one post at a time.